Howdy, this is Rob. This is Learning Disabilities and Mistakes in Leather Crafting. This is my latest project, as you can see. It's a regular card wallet that I've made these several times. I have several of them actually right there that I've made in the past, and they always give me troubles. So first, you got to make the 2 layers right here. This is 2 pieces glued together and then stitched. And it seems like whenever I do this, I cut the 4 pieces, this is basically the pattern for it. So I cut four pieces. 2 of them I put the slot in, which is what you see right there. And you can see already a mistake. I made this slot a little bit too big. Doesn't need to be that big. This one's probably a little better. Again, it's the detail that drives me crazy. I've done this so many times, and I keep thinking, okay, this time I got it. So at the end right here, you put little holes, both ends, just so that when you make the slit, the leather won't rip. I learned that by just watching YouTube videos. So I did that. It just didn't come out really smooth, but I did it. And again, then you just go to both corners of the round holes that I punched in, and that's where you can cut the slits out. But I keep making the slits, and I'm not sure, but I don't think they really actually need to be there. But it does help the wallet. Here's the one I've been using for I don't know how long now, and this is the slots that as you can see, that's the slots. And this one, it has very little slot to it, and I think that's all it really needs, because I don't know why I keep thinking I'm going to reinvent the wheel or something again, and it's just so frustrating because I keep thinking, I've been watching these videos on YouTube and stuff, and they were talking about, the way you learn is through mistakes, which is something I definitely believe, but it gets a point to how many mistakes are you going to make doing the same thing. And that's the part that gets me. And I don't know, some people might say it's just laziness or lack of focus, but I think it has to do with my learning disability for some reason. My brain just, I don't know what it does. But each time I do this, I think, like, how is it possible that I could do this same kind of mistake again? And yet I do. And like I say, when I cut these 4 pieces, I cut them all the same dimensions. The inches, I think they're 4 3/16, and blah, blah, blah. I can't remember. I thought I had it written down on this card right here, but so I guess each card should be 4 3/16. And so I do that, and when I go to glue them, they're not square, even though I cut them out rectangular, I should say. Even though I cut them what I considered the right measurements, I measured them all each time. And then when I go to glue them, the pieces never line up right. One rectangle is a little bit longer than the other one. One's a little crooked, and so I have to modify to get them straight again. And I can't figure out what happens between the cutting and the gluing together. And then I took my my square, and I learned this time that before I would just try to cut the pieces so that they would match up, but now what I do is I line up 3 corners, and then I use the square on it, and just cut them all straight. And it doesn't look half bad as far as the squares, onto the back of leather. But again, those slots right there, that looks atrocious. One looks pretty decent. The second one is just the stitching. I do like the stitching. I have to admit, I'm definitely getting better at stitching. This is some of my best consistent stitching I've done. So that's one thing I'm definitely getting better at. But as far as cutting the leather and get them to line up, and I've heard stories how like every piece of leather is unique and they have their own characteristics. But I just think that it's my brain's got its own characteristics, and but I keep plugging away. But sometimes it's so frustrating because I don't want to plug away. I don't want to start a new project because I say to myself, you know what, you're just going to make more mistakes again, the same mistakes. And I just, it just drives me crazy. And everyone says, you learn by making mistakes, but I don't know. I think that there gets a point where there's something else going on. And I, for lack of a better way of saying it, my excuse is my learning problem. And it's funny because I was watching this video about learning and all that. And the strange thing is, I love learning. I'm constantly um, interested in different things all the time: cars, history, just the weirdest thing. I mean, like I say, I've been watching the PBS channel my whole life, and it's been my books because they show things and they talk about it in a way that I would never be able to read about. And I do love learning new things. It's just I can't get enough. But there's certain things like this, or certain parts of learning that are extremely hard for me, and there's other parts of learning that aren't as hard. For instance, like I say, I've said this before, but I'm good at reading people. I'm good at talking to people. I'm good at the big picture. I'm just not really good at detail. But yet, in sports, there's a lot of detail that goes in with training. Like I love golf, and I've trained for it. I used to race, 10K races, and I did a lot of training for that. I trained with weightlifting. I trained with rock climbing. These are all things that I see progress. I work hard at it, just like somebody who's a scholar. They read a lot of books and they do a lot of studying. It's equivalence, in my opinion. And I'm tired of making mistakes. I'm tired of struggling on certain things. And again, my job is ended. Well, the virus was catapult, but I'm sure the guy was getting rid of me anyway. I know that. He says it's because his wife has cancer and doesn't want to bring any diseases home to her, which I can't argue with that. But I'm glad. I didn't really like working with the guy. He was very unsafe. But anyway, I'm always trying to learn so that maybe I can get out of my rut. Maybe I can actually make some money with leather crafting or something, because construction isn't working. And I've noticed, it's just my experience, my belief, that a lot of people who do construction, or people who are makers, a lot of them are smart people, but from what I can gather, a lot of them weren't probably good at school, or they didn't like school, for instance. I'm not sure if they weren't good, they just didn't like it. And I don't think that they all have a learning disability. I just think that it's just boring to them. Their brain works different. And I do believe my brain works different. It's not defective, even though it's called a learning disability. It's not defective. It's a disability because the education system is set up for people that have that coordination. And people like myself and others, we don't have that educationally coordinated brain. But I notice I watch a lot of YouTube on comedians. They do a lot of podcasts nowadays. And they have a very similar outlook on life that I have. And I think a lot of them are drug addicts and alcoholics, which I have that background myself too. So, but the way they think, it's like they break down the big picture and they make it very simple. And that's kind of the way I like to think. But then again, when I get on a project like this, it is simple. Just cut out some squares and glue them together and stitch them up, but I continually make mistakes all the time. Just like when I made this pattern, I kept making patterns, and they're always just a slight bit too small. I have it now at 4 3/16. That's the width or the height, and then the length of this whole thing is 6 inches 7/8. And I guess this should be a little longer. I make it so that, as you can see with this, it fits in there, but that's a tight fit. From everything I've seen on making wallets, you got to give it some room right in here. And I'm getting away with this because of the fact that these panels that I used are very thin. But again, I can't figure out why I can't just make a pattern once and have it work. And I see a lot of makers that they use software for it, Adobe Photoshop or whatever it is. And today I tried to get onto YouTube on my page there and see if I can do some editing on my videos. But again, that kind of thing is it's so frustrating because people who do it, they explain it well enough, but I just can't keep up. I need somebody to like hold my hand and go really super slow, step by step. But even with the videos, I can start and stop them. I still get lost. And again, I just don't get it. It's the most frustrating thing to a point where I just don't want to try, but I got no other choice. But again, I just think if there's anyone else that struggles like me, I feel for you. That's all I can tell you and I know there are because I'm not alone. But like when I got sober, it's not something you want to talk about to most people because most people will just look at you like you're just not trying hard enough. Just like you tell a drunk, just don't drink today. It's just not that simple. But unless somebody has that experience, they don't want to talk to you about it. Even if some of them that do have the experience, they still don't want to talk to you about it because they don't want to talk about it. I've met people that are, like I say, I see a lot of these comedians on these podcasts and stuff, and I think a lot of them are alcoholics, and they all joke about it and they argue why they're not and this and that, but nobody wants to admit that they're what society considers less than, defective. And so a lot of people just don't want to admit that, they even have a problem like this, just like they don't want to admit they're an alcoholic. But and I can't say that admitting that I'm an alcoholic has made my life any that much better, but I am glad I stopped drinking. So anyway, and I'm also just making these videos because I got to keep making them. I just got to keep practicing, just like my leather. I'm going to make better videos and start using that editing software and figure out how to use it. But I'm only going to do it if I just keep doing it one step at a time, and get my speech ready and have it more consistent and flowing. Anyway, this is Rob, learning disabilities and mistakes in leather crafting, signing out.